Very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a fun show today. We're going to kind of move away from politics a little bit. It might sneak in a little bit later, but I've got a guest in studio with me, and I want you to meet him. His name is Chad Williams. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he served his country proudly from 2004 to 2010. He is now engaged in full-time ministry work. We want to hear the SEAL stories. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that we will be covering that for most of the time together, but also what the Lord has done in Chad's life. It's a great story. He's written a book about it called Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. And the foreword is by Pastor Greg Laurie. So there's some events coming up that we'll be talking about. But first, I just really, Chad, want to talk about your story. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited.
First of all, we found out we have something in common, and that's a beautiful place to grow up, Southern California. Little different generations, but I grew up in the LA area along the beaches, and I know you were a little south of there. And so we have that in common. You still live there. I now have migrated to Texas. But first of all, tell us, I want to get the story about how you became a Navy SEAL, but tell us about the event that you're here in Dallas for.
Yeah, well, really, there's a couple of them. The first thing that's right around the calendar here is tomorrow night at SMU. I will be speaking and sharing a little bit about, life, death, the price of freedom. It's sacrifice. It's bloodshed. Not only the freedoms that we enjoy here in America, paid for in the blood of our soldiers on the battlefield, but most importantly, the blood of our Savior there at the cross. And so we're going to have some guest music as well, Shane and Shane. And so it's going to start at 7 o'clock. And so we're really hoping for people to show up there. And this is really just to prepare the way. This is called the Uprising. This is to prepare the way for a much larger event that we're doing at AT&T Stadium, and that's going to be March 6th. And so March 6th, AT&T Stadium, it's a totally free event, and we're going to have some real big-time guest music out there. I'm sure your folks are familiar with who Chris Tomlin is and Mercy Me and Lecrae. And we're also going to be having Pastor Greg Laurie, the man who wrote the foreword for my book. He's going to be giving a message, a gospel presentation, and giving folks an opportunity to get right with God by turning from sin and placing their faith and trust in Him. And so we really want to encourage folks. I mean, AT&T Stadium, very rarely could you ever walk through AT&T Stadium for free. And isn't just that, that's how the gospel message is, right? The gospel is free. What we're asking folks to do is to not only show up, but really think about who they're going to bring. They should be bringing that family member, that friend, that coworker that doesn't know the Lord. And so we're asking folks to pray, invite, bring, pray about who you're going to invite them, and then don't just suggest that they go, but actually give them the ride, bring them there. If you need to maybe use a free meal as a sort of a little bit of a bait, whatever you got to do, get them there, because we're going to be sharing the gospel, and the gospel is the power of God into salvation.
And ladies and gentlemen, of course, the event we're talking about tomorrow night at SMU, it's uprisingsmu.com. You can find out more. And if that's in Dallas. And so if you're not in Dallas, you're listening from another state, just call the people that you know in the area and let them know about this event. It's free. And of course, the one coming up on March 6th is also. So, anybody that you know that's here in this area or who would want to travel here, start talking it up. But Chad, thank you so much for being here. You were a Navy SEAL for 6 years. And, I know that is the most elite, really military group, that your training is absolutely very high level and almost, it just makes you a very elite part of the military. And I guess the question I have as I'm just kind of thinking about it and preparing is, first of all, just people serving in any branch of the armed forces. It's such a small percent of Americans that actually serve today. And yet you chose to do this. Why?
Well, really, at the time, they've got this saying that the greater the need, the greater the result. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was kind of caught in that crossroads, like, road, what is this really all about? Why am I here? And then I began to realize
At what age are you thinking this?
18 years old.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, I want to do something big. I want to do something significant with my life. Just what is that? What does that look like? And so at first I was kind of thinking of big flashy things, almost narcissistic, like, what would people look at me seeing me do? And I'm thinking, all right, I've got the perfect plan. I'll go become an Alaskan crab fisherman. It's deadliest catch, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. I thought, there you go. That's what I'm going to do. And then this other idea pops in my head. No, wait a minute. Why can't I go join the military? and not just join the military. I want to be a part of the most elite. I want to go through the most difficult, grueling military training there is. I want to be a U.S. Navy SEAL. And so at the time, I was actually sitting in the school parking lot and about to go to class and take finals. But I just decided in my mind, that's what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. And so my first order of business is this. I don't got to go to class anymore because I'm going to be a SEAL. And so I started my truck up and I just left the parking lot to go let my dad know, some bad news and good news, as I put it. And so I presented the bad news as the fact that I'm failing all my classes because I didn't show up for my finals. But the good news, Dad, is that it's okay because your son's got a plan. I'm joining the military and I'm going to be a Navy SEAL.
Wow, you've got a smile on your face like a couple of my sons when they would present ideas to me. And, I know what's happened with that idea. But what did your dad say?
He thought I lost my mind. I mean, he just about had it. I mean, he'd been watching the track record of my life and seeing me start things but never finish them. And so he's trying to reason with me. He's saying, Chad, joining the military is not like any of these things you've ever done in the past, like playing ball or skateboarding or going to the local community college, that when you decide you're over it, you could just stop. He's trying to talk some sense into me that if you join the military, son, and suppose you don't make it, suppose you quit SEAL training, he goes, you can't just get out. So he says, what's going to happen to you is you're going to find yourself stuck in the military, chipping paint on some boat in Japan. He's trying to shock me a little bit here, but I already knew. I affirmed in my mind, I'm dying before I quit. I realize I don't have a great track record here, but this is something I'm going to do. And so it's time to show him. So I really just use that as motivation too. I'm not going to show myself, I'm going to show my dad as well.
Yeah. Well, there comes a time in every young man and young woman's life that you sort of put away childish things. And, all the times that maybe you didn't finish something, that you quit or whatever. I mean, we do get to give our kids a chance to say, okay, this is really going to be my career path. And so I guess your parents sort of had a balance between trying to discourage you, but yet support, correct?
Correct. In fact, my dad, he actually sets up a workout for me. He invites me back up into his room as days go by. He sees I'm taking this pretty serious. I'm going for the runs,
So when
the swims.
was this? Like how soon after your decision?
Probably just a couple weeks.
Okay.
And he says, hey, I set up a workout for you with a Navy SEAL. Check out my computer screen. I look over his computer screen, and I'll never forget the strangest little one-liner in this email. It says, can Chad come out and play tomorrow? And I'm like looking at my dad saying, play? You met some guy off the internet that wants to play with me and you believe he's a Navy SEAL? And he goes, I've checked it out. He's a SEAL, Chad. And so, okay, fine. I'll go meet up with this Navy SEAL. Well, there's more of a conversation my dad had with this Navy SEAL by the name of Scott Helvenston that I didn't know about at the time, but I can give the folks a little bit of the backstory. See, my dad got on the phone with Scott and he asked, I need a big favor. I need you to meet up with my son because he wants to be a Navy SEAL. He's making the biggest mistake of his life. And so what I'm asking you is, would you meet up with him? And I want you to crush him. And so hence Scott's reply. Can he meet up tomorrow and see if we'll play?
Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll hear the rest of that story right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Many candidates talk about trying to implement a flat tax. One presidential candidate actually is proposing a true flat tax. Ben Carson's tax proposal has received high marks from a number of economists, even though it is unlikely that it will be implemented since his candidacy seems to be fading. Nevertheless, it is worth talking about his flat tax plan because it reminds us how far off our current tax system is from a system that would be flat, fair, and simple. He is proposing a flat tax of 14.9% on personal and corporate income that he says has no deductions, no tax shelters, and no loopholes. He's right about that. It would even eliminate the popular deductions for mortgage interest and charitable deductions. He would exempt taxpayers earning up to 150% of the federal poverty line. But he would even ask those individuals to make some de minimis payment each year so that they would be treated as citizen owners. Such a plan would be a tough sell because Americans have unfortunately been willing to let the tax code dictate economic behavior. Certain industries and businesses should not be able to receive deductions simply because they can hire lobbyists. Homeowners should not be given a deduction simply because they own a home. I do think it would be possible to explain to people that they would be better off if they just had to pay a flat tax and didn't have to worry about all the tax preparation and paperwork. If we could get Congress and the American people to try it as an experiment, most would see how the current tax system is rigged against the average person. Everyone will be paying into the system. And I like his idea of having even people who don't have to pay taxes to give something, their time, talent, or treasure. Everyone should contribute to society, even if it's merely to donate a can of food to a homeless shelter. Ben Carson's flat tax is a good idea, even if it will never be implemented. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. My guest is Chad Williams, Navy SEAL. He is the author of a book that I've just been reading, and it's fascinating. The Seal of God. Actually, Seal of God. The path is narrow, but the reward is great. It talks about Chad's journey into the Navy SEALs and into the body of Christ. And we were discussing Chad, your mentor. And of course, his name was Scott, and Scott was called upon by your own father, as you mentioned. He didn't try to encourage you to become a Navy SEAL right off the bat, did he?
No, that meeting started off with my dad asking him to please crush my son, beat this desire of becoming a SEAL out of him. And I didn't know that was the premise that we were meeting under. I thought we were just going to meet up to do a workout together. Next thing I know, I find myself running down a trail in the wetlands with this guy. And out of nowhere, he just attacks me. I mean, I get punched in the stomach. I'm going down on the ground, wind knocked out of me. This poof of dirt up all around me is, I just don't know what's going on. All I know is my dad met this guy off the internet. So now I'm thinking child predator probably. This is a setup. He's jumping on top of me and just ragdolling me in the ground. He has his hands on me and the threads of my shirt are ripping. Spit flies out of his mouth as he's just screaming in my face, going ballistic. But then I hear these words. He says, "You want to be a Navy SEAL, you better stay 3 paces behind me." And that's when it just clicked. It hit me that this is it. This is for real. That if I quit right now, I knew I'd forever be a quitter. I knew the way I respond in this moment is really going to affect the trajectory of the rest of my life. And so I just reaffirm in my mind, I'm dying before I ever give up and quit. And so he takes off on this run, 3 paces, and so I'm going after him. This goes on for a handful of miles. I hung in there. He didn't shake me. And finally we get to this point where he circles up and he's looking at me, kind of sizing me up, and looks like he wants to tear me apart. And I don't even want to project to this guy. I'm willing to fight him at all. So I'm like thinking in my head, all right, Chad, no direct eye contact with this guy. Just use your peripherals. And he breaks this awkward tension by asking me. He says, "Hey, if we would have gone another mile or 2, would you have stayed with me?" And that's when I told him, "Scott, I'll die before I quit." And he just loosens up. He goes, "Great. You want to meet up again for another workout tomorrow?" I'm thinking, we got to talk about the flashback you had on the trail there, buddy. I mean, so I just agree. Yeah, I'll meet up again. And so I'm going home feeling humiliated, dragging my feet. I just got beat up. But then it hits me that, hey, I made it through a SEAL workout and I could do this again tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. So I go from this dragging my feet to a sort of clicking my heels sort of attitude. And my dad, he can't wait to find out how this little setup went. So as I'm getting to the front door, he goes, "How did it go, son?" And I just break it to him, "Dad, I am going to be a Navy SEAL." He's scratching his head like, what? And so he contacts Scott. "What's going on? I thought you were going to crush him." He comes home. He wants to be a SEAL more now than ever. And Scott apparently told him that I gave it a go, but I think your son might have what it takes to make it. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start working with him from this day forward. So from that day forward, I met up with Scott virtually every single day. And thankfully, it was no longer a beat down. It became a building up. And when I first was introduced to him, he would always call me Bubba. But eventually I moved on from just being Bubba to he'd call me Junior. He was like a second father to me, and I idolize him. He's everything that I want to be. Extraordinary Navy SEAL. He holds all kinds of records. He's the youngest man to make it through SEAL training. He made it through at 17 years old. He is a world champion pentathlete. He is the fastest Navy SEAL in the SEAL training obstacle course, and he's the only man on a TV program called Man vs. Beast to beat the beast. He raced a chimpanzee through an obstacle course and pulls ahead of the monkey on the monkey bars. And I get to spend almost every day with this guy as he's building me up. He's preparing me, training me to make it through SEAL training. And so just days before I'm about to head off to boot camp, Scott takes an opportunity, as he puts it, to go overseas again. He's going to be going to Iraq. And he says, who knows, Junior, perhaps I can make a difference. Scott is very patriotic, cares not only about freedom.
So he'd been out quite a while.
He had been out, and he was going to go in as a private contractor. Okay. And so he's not only passionate about freedom as we know it here in America, but he was one of those that cares so much about children. He grew up in over 27 different foster homes. So that's really why he takes on this sort of father figure, this role in my life, and so many neighborhood kids in the area. I mean, he's selfless. And so he's going overseas to make this difference. And I get a phone call from him as he's on his way out. He's just reminding me that, all right, Junior, I'm about to go do this thing, referring to Iraq. And he says that it's only going to be a couple months, and you're about to go into the Navy boot camp, and that's a couple months. And he was kind of sharing with me the timing of it all is that by the time I get done with boot camp and start SEAL training, he's saying, I'm going to be back in time, and we're going to see you go through. And he says, I want you to know something. I've never told anybody that I've ever trained before, and so I'm all ears. He says, I know you're going to make it through SEAL training. And so I'll never forget those words, hung on to them. That gave me all the confidence in the world. And so he says, all right, Junior. So he's kind of reminding me the timeline of when he's getting back, and we say our goodbyes, and now Scott's gone, and I'm about to go to boot camp, and I just have a handful of days left to go. And I wake up one day, I'm turning on the television, and on the screen, I see Scott's face. It's a picture of him smiling. And I'm thinking, what is Scott doing on TV? He didn't let me know he's going to be on TV. And as I'm looking at this picture of him smiling, that's where my eyes went to the lower third, and I saw Scott's birth date, followed by a dash, and it says March 31st, 2004. And before I could really process what that meant, this still image of Scott changes, and it goes to video footage. And very similar to what we see going on today with ISIS, these premeditated attacks and the videotaping of the beheadings or the burning of the Jordanian pilot, I'm watching video footage as these insurgents have ambushed the vehicle that Scott and 3 other Americans were in, and there's Scott in the street, and I can identify him. I know him, and they've got this angry Iraqi mob. They've surrounded him with sticks and rods, and they're just beating and wailing away, mutilating him as they find rope and they wrap it around his legs. I'm just watching as the media is playing this footage of Scott being dragged through the streets of Fallujah and hung upside down from the Euphrates River Bridge and set on fire as this angry mob is chanting in Arabic, Fallujah is the graveyard of Americans. Fallujah is the graveyard of Americans. A lot of folks might remember this. It was very big in the news. It was the Blackwater Contractors, 2004, March 31st. And so I don't have the words to this day to describe, that moment of watching this, just what was going on inside. All I could really say is that it radically changed me as a human being, big time.
Did it give you pause to want to go on?
It did, because, when you think about it, when I first decided to become a Navy SEAL, all I thought about was really the sort of rock star perspective of being a Navy SEAL. You get paid to shoot guns, jump out of airplanes, blow things up. I'm thinking of like the movie, Navy SEALs.
You didn't think about your own vulnerability.
I didn't think about that. I never thought about what it would actually be like to take somebody's life either. I never thought about shooting a gun at somebody. But as I saw this, not only did it change really my motive for wanting to be a Navy SEAL, it shifted from narcissistic reasons, personal reasons to, wow, there's patriotic reason now, that I am hungry to get into the fight, to fight for freedom. Big part of me, in a way, wanted to make right what was wrong. There's a big part of me that wanted revenge even, and maybe that's not right. But, I also wanted to fill Scott's shoes. I wanted to walk in his footsteps. I wanted to do this in honor and memory of him. So I felt like this just kicked the world right out from underneath my feet. And the only way that I'm going to get back on my feet, the only way that things are going to stabilize again, that I will have peace, is if I become a Navy SEAL. And so I just kind of settled for that I'm not happy with where my life is, but once I become a Navy SEAL, that's when everything stabilizes. That's where life really begins. And so I invested everything into becoming a SEAL.
So you went to boot camp, and we only have a couple of minutes before this break, but you can start telling us about what that was like. I know that Scott ended up encouraging you, but in SEAL training, and especially this Hell Week that I read about in your book, which I think is fascinating. People should really read it if they want to understand what this is all like. There is no encouragement, is there?
Not from the instructors. There's this expectation that you need to find it within yourself to really push forward, to be a good sled dog. So in war, are you ever going to have any cheerleaders next to you saying, come on, you can do it? No, you're going to have everything set against you. And so when you're going through SEAL training, there's no words of encouragement. There's no motivation coming from the SEAL instructors. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They're trying to throw the worst at you. And so they're telling you that we don't want you, just quit, just give up. You do not belong here. Just ring that bell 3 times, because that's what somebody does to quit SEAL training. Really, in the back of their minds, secretly, they want to see you excel. They want to see you find it within yourself to not quit, to not give up. But when you're going through SEAL training, we have a saying in our SEAL creed, you're forged by adversity, and they're trying to throw all kinds of adversity at you, and they want to see what kind of man are you, what are you made of.
What's the percentage that actually finishes?
Just kind of give you an idea, in my class, I started with 173 guys, all valuing the same thing. We die before we quit, and by graduation day, there's only 13 of that original 173 still standing there.
It really, truly is the elite of the elite and the cream of the crop.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I highly recommend the book, The Seal of God. You can find out more about it by going to pointofview.net. And also, if you are in Dallas or can get here or know anyone here, Chad Williams will be at SMU tomorrow night at this event, also a free concert with Shane and Shane. And you can find out more by going to uprisingsmu.com or just go to pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone or write a check or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And my guest, Chad Williams. And Chad is a Navy SEAL. He is also a believer, and he has a great story to tell. He tells it in his book, Seal of God. But we're talking about it here on Point of View. And Chad, I wanted you to just give a couple of descriptions. I know there's so much to tell about what the training is like, what the Hell Week is like, but some of the things that affected me as I read this were the darkness that you operate in, the cold, because your training was in winter, and sometimes some of the operations are very cold, and the amount of gear and clothing you had to wear even to swim in those things. Mm-hmm. So, talk about that and, what else you'd like people to understand about this training.
Sure. So when you join the military, you go through, for instance, the Navy. If you want to be a SEAL, you go through Navy boot camp. That's a couple months long. And
probably easy for you, huh?
Hey, a lot of people can make it through Navy boot camp. But after that, that's where you get your opportunity to become a SEAL. And so you enter into what's called BUDS. And that's an acronym, and it stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This has the highest military attrition rate, the highest amount of quitters, guys that don't make it through training. And just to kind of give folks an idea of just how tough it is, in a nutshell, I'll share with them Hell Week. Hell Week is one of the most difficult parts of SEAL training. It's 5.5 days long, and you get 4 hours of sleep. And that's not 4 hours of sleep per night. That's a grand total. 4 hours of sleep for the next 5.5 days. And from the very moment that Hell Week begins, it begins with them surprising you with machine guns going off, say 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you've got hot brass of these weapons pouring out. I've got a scar on my neck to this day from brass getting caught between my skin and the collar. And they've got you doing these pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups into the thousands on this grinder. It's just this area of asphalt as they have these fire hoses they're blasting you with. And I went through in February when the water temperature and the air is just the absolute coldest. So the air's so cold, it bites. And then you get water on you and you begin to shiver. And that shivering leads into what they call jackhammering as you perform what I personally think is the worst part of SEAL training. It's called surf tortures. And surf torture is where you go down into the surf zone, and very much like it sounds, it's basically torture in the surf zone. You do not get to wear a wetsuit. You link arms with your buddies. You're out there in the dark hours of the morning, and you just lay down in the water. And this water is in the low 50s. I mean, it takes your breath away. This shivering turns into, it looks like you're hanging onto a jackhammer, and you are headed towards death. You are headed towards hypothermia. It's just a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And so what these instructors do is they say, gentlemen, we're not letting any of you out of the water until 3 of you give up and quit. And so now it's just a battle of the wills. Who's going to quit? But all these guys vow the same thing. We'll die before we quit. And I've seen all these guys on my left and on my right. I mean, they've made it to this point with me. Yeah. These are all tough guys. So who is going to quit? Well, ultimately, these instructors always get their quitters. And what it takes is you digging deeper than you ever have in your entire life to get through that, to not be one of those guys. I mean, there's guys that will hang on and hang on. You have to outlast each of these guys. And so this goes on for 5.5 days, 4 hours of sleep. If you're not in the water performing surf torture, then you're spending your time running with a boat on top of your head that rubs through the hair, through the skin in the top of your head. Just to kind of give folks an idea of how great is that pressure on you. Well, in a class before us, a guy broke his neck underneath one of these boats. You run over 200 miles during these 5.5 days with boats, and not a dry moment. It's freezing cold. You can imagine what that salt water does to your skin. I mean, maybe you've been in a pool or a jacuzzi or a lake for a couple hours, and you look down at your hands, and they're looking a little wrinkly, and thinking, oh, my hands are getting a little soft, time to get out. Imagine what 5.5 days of salt water and beach sand rubbing and grinding does to your skin. I mean, every square inch of your body, you just feel the nerves exposed. And then on top of all this sleep deprivation and physical exertion, it leads into hallucination, which is a funny thing to look back on now. I grew up watching Ninja Turtles, and I'll never forget looking in the water on one of the last nights of Hell Week, and I see Donatello coming up out of the water and looking at me, and another one like Leonardo, and so I'm having my problems here with Ninja Turtles. Other guys are jumping up on the boat, calling out things that they see, like the Statue of Liberty, in San Diego. It's like it's not there. So looking back on it, it's pretty funny. But when you're going through that, it's torture. So what I just shared is a 5.5-day snapshot of about a 2-year-long pipeline to make it through training. And like I mentioned before, how tough is it? 173 guys started my class. 13 of us graduated from that original class number. And that day of graduation, I mean, this is the fulfillment. I mean, I put everything into becoming a Navy SEAL. I did this in honor and memory of my mentor, Scott. I remember looking up in the air and thinking, Scott, we did this. I've got my family, my friends there. They're all, cheering and just so excited to see that moment where you're getting what's called the trident, the insignia that says you've become a SEAL, pinned into your chest. And not only was this one of the happiest, most fulfilling moments of my life, and this is where it all begins, but what I didn't expect was really this is just where it all begins to go downhill. It was also one of the lowest, most deflating times of my life. And the reason why is because I just put such high hopes in becoming a Navy SEAL, thinking that this was just going to deliver me from this sort of unsettledness, this feeling of just no peace in my life. And I never expected that it wouldn't succeed in doing that. And what I experienced was just a momentary satisfaction. But suddenly I've got this hunger and thirst that develops all over again, but nothing in front of me, no goal, no next, because this was the top of the mountain. I think everybody's at least familiar with this experience, at least to some degree. A lot of people in life will tell you that they don't really have much peace right now, or they're not happy with where things are going, but they've got plans, they've got goals, they've got an achievement that they're chasing.
And once they get there,
then they'll be
fine.
happy. And so what happens is we see them sometimes have the discipline to get themselves there, and they have that moment where they eat it up and they are satisfied. But what comes next is that satisfaction doesn't last. And so what do? Well, as human beings, we just reason within ourselves. Okay, the reason it didn't give me lasting satisfaction is because I didn't go for something big enough. I just need to go for something greater, trek up the mountain a little bit.
Is that what you thought?
Higher. Well, what I came to the realization was there is no next. There is no going up the mountain anymore. I realized the same thing a billionaire realized in Forbes magazine. He was asked, if you could go back in time, sir, and give yourself a word of advice, what would it be? And he said, I would go back to myself and say, hey, self, when you get to the top of the mountain, there's nothing up there. And so for me, becoming a Navy SEAL, this is the top of the mountain. I felt like I was better off not being a SEAL and looking forward to becoming a Navy SEAL, because at least then I had something in front of me to give me drive to invest hope into. But now that I've arrived, I was experiencing these words that I heard years later. These words, I thought, that's exactly what I experienced graduation day, spoken by Christian philosopher Ravi Zacharias.
Wow.
He says one of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience is when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. In the end, it lets him down. What he's referring to right there is just the human condition really on steroids, that idea the grass is always greener on the other side, but the worst is when you've gotten to the top and you realize even that doesn't do it for you. That is one of the loneliest moments. And so that's where I was at after I became a Navy SEAL. Here I am. I get put on a SEAL team, and on the outer surface, in front of all my friends, family members, and buddies, yeah, I'm on top of the world. I'm not going to let them know how I am really underneath it all, that vulnerable place. And so I tell them I'm living like a king. I'm a rock star. I made it, when in reality, at that stage of my life, I was more miserable than I'd ever been. And really what was missing there was a relationship with God.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to open up the phones. If you have a question for Chad, I'll only take a question, and it has to be just short and quick, asking him, not statements of yourself, because we have only a segment to go. But the number's 800-351-1212 if you do have a question. But Chad, we just have about a minute before the break. But the next thing, of course, was you had been raised in a Christian home. Your parents had prayed for you. They had taken you to church. They'd raised you. It sounds like they raised you with good values, but you rebelled. Mm-hmm. So here you were, and I'm sure they were all very proud of you, and thinking that you'd made them proud. You'd taken on some of the values they taught you, but were they still? I mean, did your folks see that there was that little empty space?
I think that they're very proud that I made it as a Navy SEAL, but then on the other hand, they were sad to see me begin to slip, because they were one of the first ones to begin to see me.
So that's what happened. You began to slip.
Oh, big time. I got very reckless with my life, very reckless with alcohol, and it just got to the point where I was blacking out and doing things that I had no recollection of. I mean, getting into fights, finding blood on me that wasn't mine, thinking, oh, where did I get cut? I came home one night, my mom says, you have blood on you, where are you cut? And I kind of had a moment where I'm looking myself over and I can't remember, and there's no cuts on me. So whose blood is this? It's just a blackout. Or one night I came home and I needed 26 stitches on my knuckles for a thing I don't remember doing. And I went nuts. I scared my family. I mean, I was spreading blood all over the walls. They said I was out of my mind, challenging my dad to a fight. So you can imagine what, that did for them. On the one hand, they say, we don't understand this. You became a SEAL. What's wrong with you? Like, why are you doing this? They just see me throwing it really all away. And so they're telling me, you need God. You need the Lord. And I really bucked up against that for quite some time.
But the Lord had other plans, and we'll discuss that right after this. Stay with us for more of Point of View. My guest is Chad Williams. His book, Seal of God, you can check it out at pointofview.net.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Chad Williams is here. He's a Navy SEAL. One would have thought he was at the top of the world, but he didn't feel that way. There's sort of an empty space inside. He was filling it with alcohol, and he was sort of on a downward spiral. But the Lord got a hold of you, Chad. What happened?
So my family, they see what's going on. Here I am experiencing those words I mentioned before. Ravi Zacharias, he says, one of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. In the end, it lets him down. I'm expecting to be living on top of the world, but I realize I'm still just the same guy, but even worse because I have nothing in front of me anymore to really invest into to give me hope. And so I slip into that world of drinking and just all the foolishness and regret. And my family sees what's going on. And they're just repeatedly, they're praying for me, inviting me, asking me to go with them to church or to these events. And, I had big plans of going out drinking one night. I'd stolen 2 kegs of beers with my friends, and we drank one up the night before. We're going to drink one again. And it just so happened to be that I stashed it in my hometown in my dad's garage. And he's confronting me saying, you're not welcome in the home anymore if this is what you're going to go and do. And so I decide, I'll just play my cards. I'll go to church with them. This thing will be over by 9 o'clock at night. I don't even start my night till 10 or 11. And so they'll be so happy I went. We'll get back home. They'll fall asleep. I'll fall right off their radar. And then I'll go and get my keg of beer. I could suffer through this church thing. And so I say, I'll go. And they're just blown away. You will? Like, yeah, sure, I'll go. I was thinking, poor them. They have no idea my real motives here. So they bring me. And it's an event where this man by the name of Greg Laurie is speaking, this pastor, this one that's putting on this event March 6th at AT&T Stadium. And he begins to talk about a soldier. I'm thinking, great, at least if I'm going to come to some church event, I get to hear a story about a soldier. Here I am, an active duty Navy SEAL. And what he was doing, he was reading from 2 Kings chapter 5, the story of Naaman, the Syrian commander who's had all this success in battle, an entourage of men that highly respect him, highly regard him. Even the king enjoys Naaman's company. I'm thinking, this guy sounds like he could have been a SEAL had there been such a thing during his time. He's the best of the best. It says Naaman's this mighty man.
It's amazing how relevant the Old Testament is.
Oh, yeah. And it's just amazing the communicator that Pastor Greg is, because he can make you feel like you are the only person in the audience speaking directly to you. So he says, Naaman's this mighty man of valor, like it says in the scriptures. He says, but Naaman had leprosy. And so he points out that, look, picture this if you would. He's got all this success. He's this mighty man. He's a certain man on the outside, when in reality, underneath it all, he is falling apart. He's being destroyed by a skin disease that ultimately will lead to his death. And nobody during Naaman's time had ever been healed of leprosy. So fixing this on your own, impossible. Forget about it. Oh, no doubt about it. Naaman's tried everything he could do, but this is the impossible. Well, what's impossible for man is not impossible for God. He hears about the prophet Elisha over in Israel, decides to go. He makes a long trip, brings all of his men with him. He's got an entourage. They're knocking at the door. And this Elisha, he won't even come to the door to give him the courtesy of a face-to-face. He ends up relaying to a servant that if he just goes and dips himself in the Jordan River 7 times, when he comes up, he'll have brand new skin like that of a baby. Well, Naaman, he became furious. I mean, he came all this way in front of all of his men. He's going to disrespect him like this by not even giving him a face-to-face conversation. Then he tells him to go do something so simple, so foolish, like dip in some water. He literally reasons out loud, I've got cleaner water where I'm from. Like, seriously, think he hasn't tried washing it off yet? And so as he's leaving in a rage, it says, what we see his name is true obstacle was himself. It's his pride. He's got way too much ego. And so his men are trying to reason with him. They're saying, look, Naaman, come on. You know that if this prophet, if he came out and waved his hand over this place and gave him some big, great, mighty thing to do, if he gave him a big, flashy thing to do, Naaman probably would have went for that.
He would have done it.
But since it was such a simple thing, to him it seemed like a foolish thing, and this is really related to the cross. The New Testament says the preaching of the cross is foolishness to those that are perishing. But something these guys say to Naaman begins to break through. That conviction begins to hit him, and he's about to do the most difficult. Think about it. His men, they've got this sort of respect, this reverence for him. Maybe they'd never really seen the real Naaman underneath it all. As he's about to make himself vulnerable and be transparent, the very act of stripping away that armor, that clothing that he wears would be the very moment of stripping away what needed to really go, is that pride. In an act of faith and trust, going out into that water and dipping himself those 7 times when he came up, the scriptures say had brand new skin, like that of a baby. Well, I'm right there with Naaman on the edge of my seat. And it didn't take long for it to get pointed out that, look, just as Naaman was provided a way out, God has provided a way out for your situation as well. Naaman had his leprosy and you have your sin. And it is a disease that will destroy you. The consequences of sin, the wages of sin is death. There's nothing man can do, just like Naaman couldn't do anything about his leprosy. But God has provided this way out, not in some river, but through his son Jesus, who came into this world. And he lives his holy, perfect, sinless life, the life that we could never live. I mean, that leprosy in the Old Testament, being spotted and blotted, just think of the blemishes. This is a picture of sin. And we are spotted in blood. We're covered in it. But Jesus was holy and pure and without blemish, without sin. And he goes to the cross. And the reason he went to the cross was really to trade skin with you and I, as it were. He took our leprosy or sin upon himself, suffering and dying the penalty of it, so that we could be lavish with God's grace and his mercy. He dies in our place. And what we're required to do is remember, for Naaman, it started with, he needed to go to his own funeral, as it were. Wow. Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his own cross daily, follow after me. So March 14, 2007, I realized this is what I've been missing all my life. I have no peace in my life because I have no peace with my Creator. I need to humble myself before him, repent, and place my faith and trust in Jesus. And so that's what I did, and I experienced what the scriptures say, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things pass away, behold, all things become new. And finally, I could serve as a Navy SEAL and thoroughly enjoy it, because as a believer, what you could do in the world that most people in the world cannot do is you could do things in the name of Jesus. What never had any eternal significance in and of itself, these things that we do, these temporal things in life, now we can infuse eternal significance. The scriptures say, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus. So now, serving as a Navy SEAL, not for me, but for thee, for him, now I find ultimate fulfillment in this relationship that I have with him, and knowing that what I do has eternal significance.
So we know, we can just tell from hearing you speak and give this testimony, Chad, that God is a calling on your life. And yet he had, and certainly part of that is these events that are taking place tonight or tomorrow night, Friday night here in Dallas. This is sort of a pre-event for a big event that's coming up March 6th. And I just want to let people know one more time, you can go to pointofview.net to find out more about it, or uprisingsmu.com. You'll be there speaking eloquently. People should bring unsaved friends and family. And Shane will be singing. But Chad, we just only got like a minute and a half. The Lord didn't let you leave the SEALs and go be an evangelist then. You had more to do right in the SEALs. You went to Iraq, didn't you? So just give us a quick synopsis of what happened there.
You know, fast forward, here I am, an active duty Navy SEAL serving as a Christian. And little did I know that I would find myself in a very similar place to where my mentor was when he got ambushed and killed. And we found ourselves in a very similar situation as we're getting ambushed, and we're under heavy gunfire. And we're taking what's called effective fire. This is shots from 3 different directions. And typically ambushes, I mean, you don't come out of those things alive. This is how my mentor died. But really, against all the odds, you know, my team was able to shoot, move, and communicate with each other. And we drove back, or eliminated the enemy, got out of there alive. And, you know, a big realization for me is that freedom isn't free. It's paid for not only in the blood of our soldiers overseas on the battlefield, and we are so thankful for that, but it's also paid for in the blood of our Savior there at the cross. That just as some guys jump on hand grenades, absorb the blast of that grenade to save others, or my mentor Scott killed and hung from that bridge for the sake of freedom, you know, Jesus, he absorbed the blast not of a hand grenade, but he jumped on our sin. He took all the shrapnel, the consequences of it. Why? So that we could live. You know, my friend Scott killed and hung from that bridge for freedom. Jesus was killed, and he was hung from the cross of Calvary so we could be set free. Greater love is no one than this one that lays down his life for his friends. You can see it in men like Scott and Mike Mansour, and most importantly, Jesus of Nazareth.
Chad, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost? Well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kirby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to the second hour of Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and of course, this is Sanctity of Life Week. Tomorrow is actually the anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision. And there have been marches for life going on in various cities across the country. Tomorrow is the big one in Washington, D.C. And with us to discuss that is Father Frank Pavone, and he's the National Director of Priests for Life. He's also the president of the National Pro-Life Religious Council and National Pastoral Director of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign and Rachel's Vineyard. So he sort of covers the life issue from all aspects. And Father Frank, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me on this very important week, as you just mentioned. Good to be with you.
Well, it is an important week, and I know that the march is happening in D.C. tomorrow, and yet there's also a blizzard coming. I heard it's still going on, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've had blizzards at previous marches over the years, and the march always goes forward as scheduled. Some groups can't make it.
Some lightweights.
The traveling hazards, yes. But nevertheless, the crowd here is very, the crowd's already gathering. We're having events today. I just spoke at our youth rally. We organized the official March for Life youth rally. I'll be speaking tonight at a big prayer service. So people are here already, and the enthusiasm is very strong.
Well, Father Frank, they're here already, and you've got several events that you guys are putting on or that you're participating in. What would you say would be, I noticed one press release that you guys sent out. This one father, he's actually a priest, and he, back in the past of his life, was involved in an abortion. He's sharing his testimony. Has that happened yet?
Yes, it just happened before we got on the air together, and Father Stephen Imbarato, he works full-time for us at Priests for Life, and he is the father of 2 aborted children, and like you say, from his previous life before he went into the seminary, and he speaks openly about that. He speaks about how the Lord forgave him, and he speaks about how he really betrayed his own manhood by being, just leaving her at that abortion facility, not standing up for his children, not saying, men make a mistake very often. They say, well, it's your choice, it's your decision, it's your pregnancy, I'm going to respect whatever you decide to do. But the mom, in those circumstances, she receives that message as, I'm leaving you alone with this. She receives it as an abandonment. What she wants to hear instead is, you know what, we're going to get through this together. And we're going to stand together, and I'm going to do what I need to do as the father of this child to support you and the baby, and let's make this work. And that's what he knows now that he should have said. But unfortunately, so many men fall into this sin of abortion as well.
Yeah, that positive message that you mentioned is so important, and that's why the pregnancy center movement is so powerful and is such an influence in the lives of young women, because sometimes that is all they need to tip them, is to know that there's someone there to help them.
Well, abortion doesn't happen because of freedom of choice. It happens because people feel they have no freedom and no choice. And in order to counteract that idea, we have to speak up. And that's what every person can do. One thing we can all do is that when there will be people in our circle of influence, and we say when, not if, but when, who need an alternative to abortion, our voice of hope can replace that despair in their hearts that might lead them to the abortion. We need to be able to say, there's people ready to help you. There's websites like pregnancycenters.org. There are hotline numbers. There are folks ready to take your hand in the hand of your child and make this work out for the good. And that's what we all need to be ready to say.
Why is it important that people march for life?
Well, the March for Life does several things. First of all, for the people who come, it strengthens us. When we have a conviction on the inside, that's good. When we express it outwardly by doing something like participating in a march, that conviction in us gets strengthened. And secondly, we strengthen one another. All the pro-life people coming to the march realize in a more visible and tangible way that we are not alone. The third thing it does is it brings attention to this issue in the media. All day long today, I've been speaking with different media outlets, national as well as local, secular as well as Christian, and including our time here now. And having a march literally creates a whole wave of media events around the country, and people hear things like we were just saying now, and it literally saves lives. And then the fourth thing it does, of course, is that we're in Washington, D.C., at the power of the seat of the power of federal government, and the lawmakers know that we're here, and they see us. The Supreme Court justices know that we're here. They see us too. And it is a moment when we let them know we're not going away, where we let our opponents know we are going to keep pressing this issue and not let them ignore it. And when we let our friends in Congress know that they've got support out there in the grassroots, and that's important for them to see. I mean, they're already convinced of the issue, but they need to be able to talk to their colleagues in the Congress who are not convinced and point out to them the kind of strong grassroots support that is on display at the March for Life.
Well, you don't hear about it in debates for the presidential campaign that's coming along right now. Perhaps during the Democrat debates you can. They fight over who's most pro-abortion. But Hillary Clinton received an award from Planned Parenthood recently. And I noticed a piece in the Wall Street Journal this week about how the Clintons used to be proud of the fact that they wanted to make abortion safe, legal, and rare. Now they want it to make it safe and legal, and they want it to be funded by our taxes, don't they?
Well, they've never done anything to make it rare. None of these pro-abortion politicians make it rare. We know for a fact that when the laws are passed that even give very, very reasonable restrictions on abortion, such as, okay, before you get an abortion, you should know about your alternative options. You should know about the risks and dangers of the procedure as they relate to your specific medical condition. I mean, most Americans think that this is already happening. But we see that when we put laws like that into place, more women choose life. It's not that they start, crawling over broken glass in order to get an illegal abortion. No, these laws are enough to make them think twice. Most people don't want to break the law, and they think twice, and they say, wait a minute, maybe there is a better choice. Maybe there's people to help me to make a better choice. And so, when a politician says, well, we want to make abortion rare, then ask them, well, what do you think about strengthening the support that government gives to the pregnancy centers? What do you think about making more informed consent so that people are not pushed into this unknowingly? What do you think about even limiting, abortions so that babies who are in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th months don't get torn apart as is currently happening? And none of these folks that talk about rare ever support any of these proposals. So this is important for us to call them to account. And it's part of what we're doing here this week in Washington. We are calling to account the pro-abortion politicians and saying to them that they are not only are they not serving the babies, they're not serving the very purpose of government, which is supposed to be to protect life rather than let it be taken.
Let's open up the phones, 800-351-1212. My guest is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life. We're talking about the March for Life, the sanctity of human life. We've certainly made some progress with some pro-life legislation. The next election is important because of the Supreme Court. Could Roe versus Wade be overturned? We'll ask Father Frank right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, many candidates talk about trying to implement a flat tax. One presidential candidate actually is proposing a true flat tax. Ben Carson's tax proposal has received high marks from a number of economists, even though it is unlikely that it will be implemented since his candidacy seems to be fading. Nevertheless, it is worth talking about his flat tax plan because it reminds us how far off our current tax system is from a system that would be flat, fair, and simple. He is proposing a flat tax of 14.9% on personal and corporate income that he says has no deductions, no tax shelters, and no loopholes. He's right about that. It would even eliminate the popular deductions for mortgage interest and charitable deductions. He would exempt taxpayers earning up to 150% of the federal poverty line. But he would even ask those individuals to make some de minimis payment each year so that they would be treated as citizen owners. Such a plan would be a tough sell because Americans have unfortunately been willing to let the tax code dictate economic behavior. Certain industries and businesses should not be able to receive deductions simply because they can hire lobbyists. Homeowners should not be given a deduction simply because they own a home. I do think it would be possible to explain to people that they would be better off if they just had to pay a flat tax and didn't have to worry about all the tax preparation and paperwork. If we could get Congress and the American people to try it as an experiment, most would see how the current tax system is rigged against the average person. Everyone would be paying into the system. And I like his idea of having even people who don't have to pay taxes to give something, their time, talent, or treasure. Everyone should contribute to society, even if it's merely to donate a can of food to a homeless shelter. Ben Carson's flat tax is a good idea, even if it will never be implemented. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're taking your calls here at Point of View, 800-351-1212. Did you participate in a march, or will you be this year to commemorate Roe versus Wade and that black and terrible memory 43 years ago when really the Supreme Court made abortion on demand the law of the land? Father Frank Pavone is my guest. And Father Frank, if there's certain ways that Roe versus Wade could be overturned. Number one, there's a case. The Texas law is going there. And number two, there's an election. We could have some different justices in the next few years, couldn't we?
Well, we certainly will have different justices. The question, of course, is going to be, will they be more conservative justices or more liberal ones? And it will tilt the balance of the court very severely in one direction or another, depending on who the next president is and whom we elect to the U.S. Senate. Now, as far as Roe v. Wade goes, though, it's important for us to keep in mind, and it's encouraging to note, it has already largely been reversed. And what I mean is that the court's jurisprudence on abortion consists of a large number of decisions subsequent to Roe v. Wade. Because once this Holocaust was unleashed with abortion on demand throughout all 9 months, and it had no input from the American people, it created a firestorm. And that firestorm has led to, as I say, multiple court decisions. And the overall effect of the decisions of the court in the last 40-plus years has been to weaken Roe v. Wade, in this sense particularly, that it gives more authority to the states to determine the conditions under which abortion would be legal, and in recent years, even to determine whether certain abortion procedures might even be banned altogether. Now, this is very significant progress, and we know that it saves lives, but we see, Roe getting weaker and weaker. So this could happen in a number of ways. A court could explicitly reverse the decision, or it could just become obsolete in practice. Mm-hmm. And that is what is, let's say, that's what's actually happening now. And, I think we can come to a point, too, where we see that because so many abortion clinics are closing, so many abortionists are quitting, that we end up with a situation where, okay, the legal structure is still in place, but kind of like smoking, it sort of goes out of style. And this is a cultural change, of course, that we're also working for every day.
And so on the other side of that, if there were like an explicit decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, that still wouldn't mean the end of abortion. There would still be battles in the states, correct?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because a number of different things could happen. The most common legal opinion is that a reversal of Roe versus Wade would take the shape of the court saying to the states, well, in 1973, we told you that you could not prohibit abortion. We were wrong. We are now going to say, of course, if a state wants to protect its own unborn children and its people and its legislators and its governor all agree, well, then they can do so. And now that, like you say, then would introduce the battle to make that happen in each state. It would be a state-by-state battle. But there's another outcome, too, that is theoretically possible, and it is this, that the court would completely reverse a position and say our Constitution in the United States requires the protection of all human lives, in particular and including the children in the womb. And therefore, the court would essentially be saying you need to protect these children. And, of course, that would be the position most consistent with the people who are marching here this week and in so many other places, and with so many of our fellow Americans, our fellow believers, who know the simple truth. Life is life, and if you don't have life, you don't have anything else. If we destroy these children's right to life, well, we're destroying their right to education, health care, housing, employment, national security, all these other things, which are all important issues. You take it all away in one fell swoop when you abort the child.
Wow. I love how you put things. That's pretty clear. Father Frank, there's a lawsuit against this organization who produced 11 videos that were released this summer that made people wonder even more about Planned Parenthood and some of their shady practices, especially with the sale of body parts. Now they're being sued simply for making, Planned Parenthood should be sued for doing that, and I know they're being investigated. But this organization, Center for Medical Progress, is now being sued. Do you see this as, in a sense, in the long run, a good thing?
Well, yes. It's also for us that are in these kinds of battles, and we've worked closely on this project too. It's sort of inevitable that strong stands that make progress in this fight are going to be met with all kinds of legal opposition from the other side.
But there are going to be a lot of depositions now.
Well, yes. Well, Planned Parenthood is maybe making a big mistake because you get into a lawsuit like this, and it also involves discovery on the other side, where they're going to have to depose them and get information about them. The attorneys can get an awful lot of other things exposed on the Planned Parenthood side. But the pro-life movement has dealt with this on a pretty regular basis, and if in many ways, it's also what we make of it. In many ways, the damage has already been done. Planned Parenthood cannot say, cannot prove, cannot deny that the things in those videos happened exactly the way they show that they happened. So in that way, the victory has already been won. That we have gotten this out to the public. We need to continue to get it out. And the lawsuit will proceed. However, something else is proceeding, too, that I want our listeners to understand on two levels. First of all, Congress has this select panel, this select investigative panel that is going to continue looking at the practices, not only of Planned Parenthood, but the whole abortion industry. We're working closely with them. This will be something, I think, in the coming months that could provide some good material, too, for future programs that we can talk about, because this panel has subpoena power, and they're going to get people and they're going to get documentation that exposes even more of what the abortion industry is doing. But the other thing that's happening is that prosecutors are gathering information behind the scenes. And, there's a value to getting the stuff that's on these videos out into the public arena. It creates a PR and political momentum. There's also value in getting information like this, and we're involved in some of this effort, and keeping it secret until prosecutors can get a hold of it, until government agencies can then do further investigation, and they have more power to investigate than private citizens, and then build a case, which by the time the thing becomes public, what will be announced is not, oh, we caught Planned Parenthood on tape doing this, but what will be announced is, there is this, case has been introduced now against Planned Parenthood, and they are being prosecuted for the following violations. And now it's a government agency announcing that. So that's all going on right now behind the scenes, and it's important for our listeners to pray for the success of those efforts, just as they pray for the success of this lawsuit.
Well, I know that in the House of Representatives, we have a lot of pro-lifers. We have a lot of people pushing for investigations, getting, knowledge out about Planned Parenthood. And, but, this presidential election is kind of key here too, isn't it?
Well, you and I have discussed my new book, Abolishing Abortion, and I wrote that specifically to be timed with an election year. And what I said in that book was that this is the fundamental issue in any election. It may not necessarily be so by polling, but it's so intrinsically. In other words,
it's number one for a lot of people.
Oh, it certainly, in fact, it's number one for enough people to sway elections.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a majority of the voters saying that this is the top issue. What you have to have is actually a small percentage of them, and we do have that because so many elections are swayed by a very small percentage. But what's also happening is this, that, churches, and you and I have discussed this, churches are intimidating themselves about elections. And churches are where the most likely constituents for the unborn child are gathering every Sunday, gathering every day. They're hearing the word of God. They're being commissioned by our Lord to go out and change the world. That's the place where we need to be saying to them, hey, we need to elect public servants who know the difference between serving the public and killing the public. Let's get going. Let's register to vote. Let's do, get out the vote campaigns. So we at Priests for Life are going to do that all year long. Our website is politicalresponsibility.com. And what we're doing there, we're asking folks to sign up. And I want to ask any listener who sees and knows the importance of these elections, check out what we're doing, because we want to raise up a grassroots army who are going to be able, for example, to partake in our Drivers for Life program, which is going to utilize early voting in the various states where it occurs, and we're going to help people get to the polls to cast their vote and to cast their vote for life. And that and a lot of other practical projects like that are going to be underway. Yes.
Father Frank Pavone, thank you so much. Try to stay warm back there in D.C. and have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's heartwarming to talk to you. Thank you.
Hope more than his heart gets warmed up back there. We'll be right back.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone, or write a check, or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
We're opening up the phones, 800-351-1212. What is your number one election issue? For many people, for many believers, it's the sanctity of human life, as we discussed with Father Frank Pavone. It hasn't been discussed that much in the debates. It's not front and center as an election issue. Yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, Bill McGurn wrote about the Clintons, Bill Clinton and now Hillary Clinton. Their position back in the 90s was that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. But now they're, especially Hillary, she just received an award from Planned Parenthood. She fully supports that organization and keeping them funded. So he says, Bill McGurn says, from safe, legal, and rare, their position has changed now to safe, legal, unlimited, and federally subsidized. So that is an issue. The Democrat Party is fully pro-abortion, and the Republican Party, when you look at the array of candidates out there, it's very, very pro-life. Even Donald Trump, who doesn't like abortion, has always hated it, but he was pro-choice, now says he's pro-life. So what is your number one issue? Is the life issue up there in the top issues when you choose a candidate for president or any other office? Again, the number is 800-351-1212. And, you know, Father Frank Pavone also talked about, in discussing the March for Life and sort of the importance to do that, it does take place, the big one, the D.C. March takes place, blizzard or no blizzard, tomorrow on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This is the 43rd anniversary of Roe versus Wade, which forced every state in the union to permit the destruction of innocent unborn children. And as he talked about how Roe versus Wade is being dismantled by various court cases and laws, limiting abortion in all different ways. And, you know, the court of public opinion has also changed over the years. And this comes from, well, Gary Bauer reports this, but it comes from the Marist Institute for Public Opinion. Americans overwhelmingly reject the left's extreme abortion on demand agenda. Some of the key findings are 81% of Americans support some restrictions on abortion. So by far, almost all Americans support some restrictions. Only 12% say a woman should be able to abort her child at any time during the pregnancy. 60% of Americans believe abortion is morally wrong. I think Donald Trump would have fallen into that category even when he was pro-choice. And a lot of other politicians try to straddle that line. I think it's disingenuous. 68% of Americans, including 69% of women, oppose the use of taxpayer dollars to fund abortions. And 61% support banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, except to save the life of the mother. There are a lot of laws now in various states with regard to that. It's the 5-month ban. So, you know, if you've ever had a baby or if you have children, 5 months pregnant is pretty pregnant. And banning it at 20 weeks is, you know, it's just common sense. It really is. And so those are on the books in various states. The federal government has considered it. That hasn't passed, that ban. And I think one of those bans is going to the Supreme Court next year. So that ought to be interesting. We are taking your calls on this issue. And I asked the question, what's your number one campaign issue? What are you voting on? What's important to you? Let's go to Sabrina in Colorado. Hi, Sabrina. Thanks for calling in.
My name is Sabine, Sabine.
Sabine,
yes.
What a beautiful name.
Thank you. You know what? I listened now for several years to this abortion thing. What have we really accomplished with it? We talk and talk and talk. What I think should be done is not after the cow has left the barn. We need to make sure that people don't get pregnant in the first place if we can't handle having these many children.
The choice is really a little bit earlier, isn't it?
That's right. It's much too late. And I think maybe we should sterilize every baby that comes into this world. And when they're old enough and responsible enough, we reverse the sterilization and then they can sign up to have children. Because there are so many children in foster care. And what
Well,
do we
that
really
sounds like
give
a
it?
bit of a totalitarian, drastic
Well, you know
solution.
what? Isn't it totalitarian when we abort? That's totalitarian too, isn't it?
Well, you know, sometimes the cure, the quote unquote cure for the problem, is worse than the disease. I think that would make us into a nation that we don't want to see.
Well, we have too many people in this world. We can't feed them. We don't have jobs. Once they are here, we don't do very much for our children. We don't really help the people once
Where
they're
are you
here.
from, Sabine?
I was born in Germany.
Okay. And you think
And-
we don't do very much? I mean, it's like government is supposed to take care of everyone. Is that what you're implying?
No, I think we each other should take care of each other. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I
All right.
just think
Interesting solution. What's your number one election issue? Are you going to vote?
I will vote, but I definitely will vote for. I mean, I'm not for abortion, but I think for everybody has their own choice to make. I have a free choice. Definitely for
Are
that.
you free choice for whether you're going to abort your baby, or free
Yes,
choice
yes,
on who you're going to
yes.
vote for?
No, what you do is once you get pregnant. But I think we should do more and start out teaching young women to have more self-esteem. We always talk about abortion and women. What about men? Why don't men teach their own young men how to keep their pants zipped? I don't think there are that many women out there who go, "Oh, please, let's have sex." It's men who talk women into sex mostly.
You know,
So
okay,
maybe
Sabine,
we
this
should
is something we could
men.
probably agree on, because I think that, you know, the culture has gone so far toward just accepting the fact of non-marital sex.
Right,
That
right.
there's no stigma to it at all anymore in the media. I mean, in the church is about the only place. Everywhere else, it's almost, you know,
And
to
even
say
in
you
the church,
shouldn't
we don't-
cohabit
we don't-
or, yeah.
Yeah. Even in churches, we don't talk enough about chastity. And I think, now that I'm 70 years old, I think I wish I had learned more when I was a young person. I think I had learned more about chastity and more self-esteem. You know, I don't have to be in love. I think women mostly look for love in all the wrong places. They want to be loved by somebody. And I think if we can give that to young people, maybe we won't have so much sex before marriage.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people talk about, Dr. Dobson talks about this, of how the relationship with the father is so important.
I listen to his show, and I wish we had more people talk about this and have more for young people that they can at least listen to.
Yeah, because he says that if the father gives the daughter a sense of self-esteem through you know, just affirming her throughout her childhood, she's less likely then to go out and have sex with the teenage boys.
Yeah, I really do believe that we need to have more support in the family, but since our families are not working so well, and I have to be honest, when I was a mother, I was not very well informed how to talk to my daughter, and when she said, "Oh, I learned all this in school already," I was kind of happy.
So you didn't have to do it? Were you happy with what she learned?
You know what? I don't even know what she learned. But she is 35, and she hasn't gotten pregnant. She's married. So, I mean, I was just lucky. That's all I have to say.
So are you hoping to have grandchildren?
Well, I hope one of these days, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope so, too, for your sake. Thank you, Sabine.
Yes.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Hillary Clinton, I wanted to mention that earlier in the program, we had a wonderful interview with a Navy SEAL named Chad Williams. And he became, after he got done with the grueling training, he became a Christian, and now he's an evangelist. But it's so, I asked him during the break, and we didn't get to talk about this, about the new movie, 13 Hours. Have you seen that? And maybe over the weekend it might be something to see. He said we should see it, because he said that he's interviewed Navy SEALs and others who say that what's in it is accurate, and that our State Department really, really dropped the ball. I wanted to mention that just sort of as a note for perhaps something you might want to put on your calendar. That, but Hillary Clinton, of course, you know, she was kind of responsible for that, ultimately for the reaction. And she said she doesn't have time to see the movie, but she does have time to do things like appear on Jimmy Fallon's show Ellen DeGeneres' show, and Lifetime Network to be interviewed by YouTube stars. No time to see the movie that is all about one of the signature criticisms of her foreign policy under as Secretary of State under her tenure. So thought that was a little bit interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're still asking the question here at Point of View. What is your number one campaign issue? What do you consider to be the most important issue? And how important is the sanctity of human life as an issue as you select who you'll vote for not only the White House, but also your congressman, your senator? We're taking your calls, 800-351-1212. We've put a couple of pieces up about the life issue and the March for Life. So you can check out pointofview.net. Take a look at that. And also, there's a donate button there. See what you can do with that. And we'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to send you to the Point of View website. We've put up a few articles for your reading pleasure. One of them is Fighting for the Unborn with the March for Life by Ken Blackwell. It's a Washington Times piece we've put up. It's sort of a good synopsis of what the March for Life is all about. He's senior fellow and member of the policy board of the American Civil Rights Union. And he talks about how an unwanted pregnancy is a significant burden. The reasons, for one, are many, and the political process is not in place to judge the reasons why. But abortion isn't the answer. It's just not a good answer. The consequences, says Ken Blackwell, are rarely benign for women who abort their babies. You have regrets, you have physical problems, psychological problems, and the body seems to naturally rebel against efforts to destroy what it has created. And of course, there's a worse fate for the child, the unborn child. And then abortion is also disproportionately affects minorities. Often abortion clinics are on the edges or within minority neighborhoods, poorer neighborhoods, and close to college campuses, of course. So that's why the March for Life is happening. It's a sad occasion. It marks a low point in American constitutional history. But as Father Frank Pavone says, there's reason for hope. There's progress being made, laws being passed to limit abortion, and perhaps Roe versus Wade might be officially overturned. It's been overturned piece by piece over the years. So, and then I want to point you to one more piece that's up at pointofview.net. It's about our former Senate Majority Leader and presidential candidate Bob Dole. He's 92 now. He says that, and this is a piece out of the New York Times, Bob Dole warns of cataclysmic losses with Ted Cruz and says Donald Trump would do better. And we're hearing bits of this type of news around and about the establishment Republicans. They see this Trump phenomenon, and they're tending now towards seeing Trump as their guy rather than Ted Cruz. They think he's more malleable. So if you have an opinion on that, we'd love to hear from you. But let's take some calls. Let's go to Jacob in the state of Georgia. Hi, Jacob. Thanks for calling in.
Yes, thanks, and thank you for receiving my call. And first, I want to thank God for Father Pavone and Alveda King.
He's a national treasure, isn't he?
Yes, and
so
he has a young lady there fighting with him. Alveda is really fighting hard for the unborn baby.
Yeah, Alveda King is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the family.
Yeah, I know you know, but maybe all our listeners don't.
Yeah, Daddy King was a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
But what I see as the problem is you got a divided church. You got a black church, you got a white church. Majority of black churches, they don't even have an involvement in abortion, and they don't even, their pastors are ignorant of Planned Parenthood and the purpose of Planned Parenthood. So the congregation is totally ignorant of the fact that over 1,800 black babies are being murdered every day in America through abortion. And and when we look at the sad part about it, the majority of blacks are Democrats. And the majority of them is going to vote for a Democrat. They don't care if it was a Hitler. And that's the sad thing. And until we can try to get the black
both
church
parties used to be in a sense. There are a lot of pro-lifers in the Democrat Party, even as much as about 15 years ago. But you really don't find it anymore.
Now. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about now. And what we're looking at now is I travel around, I speak and talk and everything, and it's amazing that there's no involvement. You look at the big names. You look at T.D. Jake and Creflo Dollar and all of these guys. You never ever hear them say anything about abortion. And
do you have any theories as to why not?
Do
you have any theories as to why not?
Yes, because one day T.D. Jake will not speak against it because he loves Obama. And he supports Obama. He supports
So it's political then?
Yes. And they do not want to take a stand. And one of the major reasons is because it's that thing between white and black. There's an unforgiveness. Anything that basically a white person started up, majority of the blacks would not join in with it because they're still caught up on that unforgiveness, that past, and all of that.
Okay, well, it's just sad because there's a black genocide going on, and I think it's only blacks that can really end it.
That's right. Then the idea is I think we have to get more whites to integrate into the black churches. And we got to have white disciples and missionaries that go in there in those churches, visiting those churches, talking with these pastors and things and letting them know because a lot of times they don't want to listen to a black man.
Okay, Jacob, thank you for your call. I really appreciate it. You brought up some interesting things, and I need to now go to Billy in Colorado. Billy, thanks for calling in. Hey, Billy.
Hey. How you doing today?
Great. How are you?
Marvelous. My theory on an abortion is, one, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. When you put that baby up for abortion, you're killing that child.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's not a theory.
I'm not right, because I actually put my child up for abortion, and that weighs heavy on me.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Truthfully, it should have all started in the beginning when you were going to school, that if you get pregnant, you got to raise that child. If you cannot raise that child, your family's going to be burdened with that child. It's hitting the young ones faster and harder. Sex. It's on TV. It's on the computer. Sex. Truthfully, they should start letting the kids know. Killing a child is illegal. You should go to jail. It should not even be part of the fact.
Well, Billy, okay, I just want to thank you for calling in, especially to say that you regret the abortion that you were involved in, because I know that you represent many others. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to take one more call before the end of the show. So many people have been waiting. Let's go to John in California. Hi, John. Real quick.
Hi. The thing I don't hear it mentioned, but DNA. Back in the military in the mid-'90s, we all got DNA'd so they could identify our bodies if we were left on a battlefield or got blown up and they had just parts. And it seems like DNA is a great way of identifying fathers. And if when there was an abortion, if you had DNA that would identify who the mother is and also who the father is, and everybody has their DNA on file, then you can say, well, you know, Bobby Joe over here, he's the father. And, oh, look, Bobby Joe's been getting a lot of people pregnant, and you kind of keep a running score.
So what would you do to the person?
Well, you could put it up on public networks, on social media. Here's this guy, girls out on a date in a bar, meets a guy, goes to social network, find out that this guy has fathered 5 children that have been aborted. Might not be a good bet. You know,
okay, John, thank you so much. I appreciate you calling. Sorry to interrupt. We're just about on the end of the show. We've had some interesting solutions proposed. I think probably a better solution would be to keep sexual relations within the institution of marriage, and then when a child is conceived, we can joyfully welcome that child. And certainly, the alternative has caused so much sadness, and has even spawned this powerful pro-life movement that now looks back with sadness on that day 43 years ago. So if you are anywhere and you're able to march, we encourage you to do that, just to signify the fact that you actually hold up and elevate the sanctity of human life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Again, I want to point you to pointofview.net for all the articles and the websites that we've discussed today. And you can take advantage of all of those. Thank you so much for joining us.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost, well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kirby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families.